I have a riddle for you. When is fusion confusion? Well, I'll let you in on that. So here's what we're talking about. Whenever two shapes are touching each other in a painting, it causes them to fuse together visually and appear as if it's one shape. Or if a shape is touching the edge of a painting or drawing, same thing. So let me show you. There are four kinds of fusions that happen that can cause confusion to the eye. So let's briefly go through them here. So one, let's just draw a little rectangle here to represent our picture frame. One would be, so you got two shapes, and say the two shapes are sitting on the surface, on the same surface together. And let's just use circles to represent those shapes. So if you put those shapes side by side like that, so they're touching, that creates that visual fusion. It's something I see an awful lot, and it disturbs me every time I see it. What do you do? What's the best way to handle that? Put some space between them, because we as visual artists are interpreting three-dimensional space. And so while we're interpreting that three-dimensional space, we need to do things that don't confuse the eye. So simply put some space between them. And so it doesn't have to be much space, just a little bit of space between them. It's almost like a pair of glasses there. All right, so there's one thing. And there could be any kind of shapes. You don't want the edges of those shapes touching. So you put space between them. The other thing that you could do is to overlap them, put one in front of the other. So another thing that causes fusion and makes it confusing is to have a shape touch the edge. So let's say if I had a box, for example, like this, and the edge of that box is touching the edge of the picture frame, like that, it makes it fuse. It doesn't feel right. It feels disconcerting. So the better thing to do, rather than to have this edge, the edge of the box, touching the edge of the canvas or whatever, would be to put some space there, like that. Now, if you wanted the box to go off, you didn't want to show the whole box, you wanted to crop it and have it go off the edge, okay, let it go off the edge, but we want that suggestion. If you go off the edge, we would want that suggestion that there is something of the box going off on the other side. So that's what we're actually saying when we're cropping something on the edge of a painting or a drawing or any work of two-dimensional art. When we're doing that, we're actually saying the rest of me is on the other side. So, so that's important to remember. Either have some space between them or allow them to move off onto the other side. So there's the other thing. Now, another thing that I've noticed that is disconcerting is to have a shape going off the edge at its halfway point. And that would really be disconcerting if you have a person's face going off at the halfway point. It's better to have either 1/3 or 2/3 of that image on the other side. So, for example, say we'll just say going back to the circle idea, like that, half the circle over here, half the circle over there, it gives a disconcerting feeling. So the better thing to do would be to have just a portion of the circle, 1/3 maybe, and let's show you that feels even maybe a little bit better to have the 1/3 of the circle going off on the other side. That one you need to work with according to what the image is. And so there are those, and then there's one other, and that is what I call the closed corner. And that is where a corner gets cut off at with a 45-degree angle. And this is, I see this a lot of times, especially when roads are moving into a painting, whatever. What you'll have is a corner cut off like that. Well, that isolates that corner and prevents it from being a part of the painting. And so rather than to have that kind of thing, especially at a 45-degree angle, you'd want that corner to be more like that, so that you'd have a larger percentage of the corner on one side than on the other. And of course, depending on how that relates to your image, that's not quite so confusing. But when you have that 45-degree angle corner, it makes it isolate because they're all the same size. It just creates a 45-degree triangle. So those are your 4 tangents that have to do with fused shapes that can cause confusion to the eye. And if you found this quick tip helpful, why not explore our full instructional videos found at DianneMize.com. We have numerous downloads and DVDs for you to select from, so give it a try. And there's your quick tip.